Well, why don't we share a word of prayer? We give you thanks for a brand new day, O God. A day of opportunities, a day of challenges, a day of easy paths to walk, and perhaps a day with obstacles in our way. And we know, O Lord, through all things you are going to be with us, to walk with us when the trek is easy, to guide us and hold us up when things get rough. And we would ask, Lord, that you bless all of those whom we have lifted up before you today, everyone with their own unique needs, but all who can find a sense of answer and relief in your presence in their lives. So touch them, Lord, in ways that go beyond human touch, and help us as those who are caring and concerning to reach out to others who may be in need, to do what we can, and to do it in Jesus' name. For it's in his name that we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, we are going to finish up the Gospel of John this morning and looking at verse 18 and to the end. And what do we have in all of this stuff? Well, we have deceit, we have denial, we have death, we have resurrection, and we have doubt. And certainly there are, I would say, at least three things that every human has experienced, and that is, or four things, death, deceit, denial, death, and doubt. They are part of the human experience. And when we look at deceit, we of course our model for deceit is Judas. And Judas is very clear in making sure that Jesus can be identified by those who are coming to get him. Even though Jesus says, I am him, Jesus doesn't necessarily need Judas's help in identifying as the one that the people, the powers that be are looking for. But all of this really starts back in chapter 13 when we have the Last Supper, and Judas takes leave and begins this plot going. And as we've said before, if you would look at the Gospel of Judas, Judas is not seen so much as being an evil outlier as he is a necessary element to God's salvation story. Judas, in the Gospel of Judas, it's written in such a way that we would see Judas as being perhaps maligned and misunderstood. Because without Judas, we don't have the identification, we don't have the betrayal, and without the betrayal, we don't have everything else that sets in motion. But I think all of us, at one point or another, may have practiced deceit. Not saying that it was Judas' deceit, but it might have been something small. And in fact, it might have been done with the best of intentions. You know, not wanting to hurt somebody's feelings. So we look for the words to say that maybe aren't exactly what we're thinking, but it comes across a little milder than if we were to say it like it, what we were really feeling. And that's something I think that, you know, we all wrestle with, because we all want to be rigorously honest. And yet, there are times that we need to temper our honesty in order to be sensitive to the needs of others. Now with Judas, of course, it went beyond that, because he wasn't interested in what the others were feeling. He was interested in collecting his 30 pieces of silver and handing Jesus over to be tried. And within this mess of denial, we have Peter step in. And Peter has a sword. And so he cuts off the servant's ear, Malchus. He cuts his ear, which is you know, not a very hospitable thing to do. In Luke, if you remember the story out of Luke, Jesus then fixes the guy's ear. In John, he doesn't. In John, I guess that ear just is on the ground. When I was driving ambulance up in Bushkill, we took a guy to the hospital, and then we had to go back to the accident scene and look for his ear.
Were they able to reattach it?
I don't know if they were or not. We did find it. It was kind of like a scavenger hunt. Some pedestrian came walking by. Hey, did you see a loose ear?
This is Charles Stanley. This is Judas Iscariot powerfully reminds us of the horrific possibilities within every human heart. While he called Jesus Rabbi, there is no record that he used the term Lord.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think I realized that before. Yeah. He never says Lord, it's always Rabbi.
And I think that Judas was very tentative. Consider Judas, if you will, as far as the disciples. The disciples are a group. Judas is more on the fringe. Even, you know, back where he was the keeper of the money bag and would steal money for himself. You know, there's that hint that he's not quite fully connected to what's going on. And why he got involved, you know, maybe he thought it was a good idea at first. Maybe he became disheartened over time when his understanding of the Messiah was going to be this militaristic, powerful force that was going to get rid of the Roman Empire. And when that proved to be anything but, he became even more disheartened and felt that maybe, well, I got to get something out of this. And because like the other disciples, he probably gave up his occupation. We don't know. We don't know what he did, but gave up his livelihood.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
What was Jesus' role in keeping him?
Well, I think, again, it's part of what did Jesus know about how this story was supposed to unfold? If Jesus was really in touch and understood, which I think, he says that he needed to do the work that he was sent to do. That maybe Judas was indeed someone he saw as being an important part of the story. Without Judas, do we have a betrayal? Or are the other 11 not going to go that direction? Or, if the elite didn't find Judas, would they have infiltrated the disciples more and found another willing person to kind of take over the role of
I always felt that the driving force with Judas was the money.
very well could have been, that because if indeed Judas was looking at Jesus to be this great Redeemer King, that would have put him on easy street, and so he's indeed looking at profiting somewhat, much like we might do in a job change. Am I going to be better off than I was? Well, if Judas was looking at it from that perspective, then he might have said, okay, I was a tent maker, and I made X amount of denarii a year making tents. Well, if Jesus is going to take over Israel and rid it of the Roman Empire and be king, maybe there's more money in being part of that group, and it was a risk.
What did the other disciples think of him? I mean, they were all together. They know.
I don't know. That's an interesting question,
Yeah.
because did they suspect anything? Did they feel uncomfortable around him? Was he the type that you always just thought was a little bit strange? Because we find that in any group that you're part of, there's a good possibility that you're going to have somebody who doesn't quite fit in as much as everybody else.
Wouldn't you think Jesus predicted early on that one of the disciples were going to betray him? He doesn't, I don't think, comes out and names anybody, but he probably had an idea who it might be.
Well, at the Last Supper, he says, go do what you have to do. And when Judas goes out, the disciples at that point think that he's going to go out to distribute money to the poor. But Jesus knows what he's going out to do. So, we can just kind of accept that Judas is an integral part to this story, and without Judas, maybe the rest of the story doesn't happen. And that deceit, I suspect every story has some deceit in it. Sometimes it doesn't work out at all. I think many years ago, that energy company in Texas, Enron, Kenneth Lay, and I forget who the CFO was, but they kind of got caught up in a cycle of deceit, and it didn't work out for them. For Judas, maybe that 30 pieces of silver was, hey, this is going to work out good. Even though, he tried to give it back and ended up throwing it back, and then went out and, according to tradition, either hung himself or fell and broke his head open, and that kind of thing. But it could have been, for him, just a business decision. I can make 30 pieces of silver. That was pretty good coin. Why not? Jesus hasn't delivered what I thought he should deliver, so it's not like I feel the need to have any real loyalty. Every man for himself, kind of thing. And I think that holds true as we move along a little further, because in a way, Peter is deceitful then in his denying Jesus 3 times, because he flat out lies to the people who confront him and say, hey, aren't you one of them? No, not me. And after the 3rd time, the rooster crows and the jig is up. But
You would think, though, that if he had all that faith in Jesus, that I guess he knows he could go too, but, that basically throw him under the bus, and say no.
Peter has a reactive personality. He's not the type of guy that thinks through things. His MO is to shoot from the hip. And so we have the denial with the transfiguration. He's the one that wants to build houses to keep everybody together. He's the one who cuts the ear off of the servant. He just is always making these miscalculations about things.
In other words, would you call him a troublemaker?
Unintentionally, I think he's one of those that can't help it, but whatever comes into his head comes out of his mouth.
I'm thinking he was either a very good swordsman or a very poor swordsman, depending on where he was aiming.
Just
something I
well, and it's a good point, because if he really wanted to do some damage,
Yeah, what if he's,
you would have thought he would have had a little better.
was he aiming between his eyes and missed?
It must have been hard for Jesus, though, I don't think. I mean, if you know what's going to happen, and you find out these things about these people, and yet he's always there for them, and it's kind of sad, you know. I mean, he wants to give them everything, and they, not all of them, but I feel bad for him, because how do you know, I don't know. I don't know if that bothered him, maybe.
Didn't Jesus actually tell Peter that he was going to deny
Yes, yeah.
ahead of time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, with Peter, the whole thing comes full circle, because after the resurrection and the appearances of Jesus to the disciples, Peter is restored to a place of prominence. And it seems as though with that, that essentially Jesus is willing to accept that Peter is Peter. And for all of his faults, he has a lot of gifts that will come in handy for the development of the movement. And so with Peter, we have him as the first pope, if you will. And although Jesus promises him that he's going to die the same way that Jesus did, and he almost did, tradition has it that Peter insisted, however, on being crucified upside down, because to be crucified like Christ would be would not be humble enough, and to be crucified upside down would show humility, for what it's worth with that. And the whole story unfolds with almost like a police drama on TV, like Law and Order or something, where there's an arrest and there is a makeshift trial for all intents and purposes. It's a little bit of a kangaroo court, where at least Pilate wants to give Jesus an out, and is basically just looking for him to say the right thing, so that he can offer him this out. And he even says to Jesus, look, I have the power to release you. And, Jesus comes back and says, you wouldn't have any power if it weren't God-given. So he ends up accepting that Jesus is going to hold his ground. And the affirmation in that is then when Jesus is crucified, the sign says Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews, and the objection is it should say he said he was the King of the Jews, and Pilate's response is, I wrote what I wrote. So,
Do you think Jesus let all this go because at that time it was God's will and he knew that God had this plan this way, so he just went through with it?
I think that he understood his role as an actor in the play and not the director. And that he had a role to play, and everything, the salvation of civilization depended on Jesus playing the role that he was casting. And so it was a purely selfless journey that he was taking. And, you know, there were just these little side stories that pop in that don't change the thrust of the story, but maybe give it a little bit of more dramatic effect. Little subplots that go on. So Jesus is sentenced to death, and he carries his own cross. It's not like the synoptics where Joseph of Arimathea is consigned to help carry the cross. He carries his own cross. He's crucified. He's buried in Joseph's tomb, and the resurrection comes, and he appears to Mary Magdalene, and she goes back and reports to the disciples, who apparently are not sure how to take her words. And it's only when Jesus appears to them in the locked room where they're staying that they understand.
At what point in all of that process did Judas commit suicide?
You know, I don't know, because that doesn't fall into the gospel story itself. That's more the gospel of Judas and would be part of the pseudepigrapha, the additional books that didn't make the cut. But apparently it was in pretty rapid fashion that Judas recognized the error of his ways pretty quick, and couldn't live with himself at that point. So we get onto that whole theme of doubt. And I've preached enough on doubting Thomas to say that, well, Thomas was also pretty brave, because while the other disciples are locked up in the house for fear of the Jews, he's out doing something. He probably drew the short straw and said to him, okay, Thomas, you lost. You go to Weiss's and get supplies.
You're on the food run.
Yeah. And apparently did well at that, but came back, and all Thomas wanted was the same experience that the other disciples had. The other disciples saw Jesus, saw the wounds, believed because of that. That's all Thomas wanted, was to have that same opportunity. One of the things that is toughest about our faith journey is, boy, it would sure be a lot easier if we could have tangible proof of our beliefs. Well, that's what Thomas was looking for. Now, is he one step removed? Yeah, because his fellow disciples already told him what they experienced, and apparently he didn't trust them. So, is he another one that is more along the outlier? You know, that kind of like Judas, that he just didn't fit in.
Did Thomas ever go on to set up churches like some of
Yeah.
the other? He did?
Mhm. Yeah, Thomas, I think, you know, not only the whole doubting part is what takes center stage with him. And that's unfortunate because there was so much more to it. When Jesus is going to see Lazarus, when Lazarus dies, and he's going to see Mary and Martha, and is going into a real beehive of risk, it's Thomas who says, "Let us go and die with him." So Thomas is showing a pretty good depth of trust and faith, and probably doesn't lose that. And part of it depends on you know, again, the written word is very hard to put emotion into it or inflection. Was Thomas saying to the other disciples, "Bah humbug, I'll only believe it if I see it," or, "Gee, you know, it'd be kind of nice to be able to see what you guys saw"? We don't know.
He kind of felt left out, I guess.
Yeah, I would think that would be,
They have it, why don't I?
and why didn't Jesus wait until I was back and then show up? You know, instead of, and then making Thomas sit a week, and then Jesus comes back again, of course, shows Thomas everything that the other disciples saw. And Thomas, Jesus, you know, gets the final zinger in when he says, "Blessed are those that have not seen and yet believe." So, you know, he may be zinging all the disciples at that point. And saying, you know, and not only the 11 remaining disciples, but their unwillingness to trust those close to them. You know, because the first appearance in John is to Mary Magdalene. And Mary Magdalene rushes back and tells the disciples what she's experienced. Did the disciples buy into that? Perhaps not totally. They might have been a little skeptical because they apparently needed this appearance to also solidify their belief.
Did the other disciples, did they know what Judas was up to, or did they have any ill feelings for him? I mean,
You know, I think it's hard to say because it's really not spelled out.
you know,
But I'd like to think that Thomas was seen as one, or Judas was seen as one who just really never connected at the level that the other disciples connected with each other. almost the perfect metaphor for life in the church, where, you know, we are the body of Christ, and we are all different parts that make up one. And then there's always some that are just very resistant to really wanting to engage. And really never become part of an inner circle. Thank you, Jane. Were the other disciples, thank you, cliquey? Maybe. You know, maybe they were all palsy-walsy, and Judas just didn't fit in. You know, they all wanted to go to the ball game while Judas wanted to go to a concert. And
Do you think Judas felt like an outsider?
well, if it was because he chose that.
Okay.
Much like we make choices about if we probably have a harder time making a choice to be an insider, because to be an insider we need permission of the others to be part of. It's easier to choose to be an outsider, you know, kind of a rebel without a cause. And it's not necessarily an unhealthy situation. It's Judas may be very comfortable with who he is, and that he just doesn't fit in like the others. And maybe that not fitting in is additional motivation for saying, well, I might as well get something out of this, so I'll get my 30 pieces of silver and be gone with it from there. But all those dynamics, and think about just in general, group dynamics. When we all were in school, was there always one or more people who just really didn't seem like they fit in? Were there people who seemed to intentionally withdraw from the group to kind of stand alone? Probably we can all identify someone. It might be us, because when you look at schools and cliques, and you may be part of something today and not part of something tomorrow, and maybe part of the educational process is trying to negotiate, how do I fit in? And if I don't fit in, what do I do with that? Do I try to maintain a sense of decorum and follow the rules of the group, even if I don't feel like I'm part of the group? Or do I just go my own way and let the chips fall where they may? I think that's a hard decision that we may face at times.
Well, everybody wants to fit in.
Mhm. I think a good example of fitting in is when I would do youth retreats, and as part of the retreat there'd be a speaker, and as part of the speaker there would be an altar call, and if the right kids got up and went down, everybody was going down. You know, it was a publicly positive act, but it didn't necessarily stick. You know, it wasn't necessarily sincere. It was, oh, my buddy Joe's going, so I'm going to go down too. And we see that, you know, we're social beings. There are people who are more social than others. I think of like, he's not antisocial, but my brother is like just not a social being. I mean, we were all struggling during COVID because we couldn't see each other, and he was having the time of his life. You know? I can't see my friends, and he says, I don't have to see anybody.
Everybody's different.
Yep.
Well, let me ask, when it comes to group dynamics, you know, we end up jockeying for position. We know that, for example, James and John asked Jesus if they can sit in his right and his left hand in glory. So they're trying to jockey for a top spot. Peter, who makes many mistakes along the way, ends up kind of getting that CEO spot among the disciples. And then we have this mystery that's exposed towards the end of the Gospel of John, the disciple whom Jesus loved, but is unnamed.
I was going to ask you about that.
And that disciple finally identifies himself as the gospel writer. Whether or not it's John or not, we can't say. But
Is there any proof that it wasn't?
no. It's, you know, tradition would have it that it is. And that's as good as anything else. But, you know, in terms of, is there DNA evidence? No. And the love that this disciple writes about, or how it's expressed, is that this disciple whom Jesus loved is being charged with taking care of Jesus' mother. Now, where the rest of Mary's kids are, I have no idea, because there were a few. And why Jesus commends his mother to be with a non-family member, I don't know.
I have a question.
Mhm.
I didn't realize that there were 3 Marys at the cross.
Mary of Cleopas, and Mary Magdalene. You know, Mary, Jesus' mother, is one. And then the other Mary, who probably is Martha's sister.
The one that's wife of Clopas.
Yeah. And then Mary Magdalene, who is worth a study on her own. Mary Magdalene is much maligned, and in essence becomes the first evangelist, because she's the one that takes the message that Jesus is alive back to the disciples. She's the first witness to that.
I have another question. Let's see. When the soldiers come to him and say, well, they're looking for Jesus of Nazareth, and then he says, I am the one you seek. And then he says, this was to fulfill the word which he had spoken, of those whom thou gavest me, I lost not one.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think what it means is that he stayed loyal to the disciples. Now, the disciples didn't necessarily stay loyal to him, because they scattered.
But I lost not one.
Yeah.
They would have stayed with him.
Hmm?
They would have stayed with him. I lost not one.
Yeah, I would think that as well, but I think that maybe an answer to that is, if they scattered, that was not Jesus' intent. Jesus was loyal. The disciples may have wavered, but it wasn't Jesus' decision. And it may go back to the whole Good Shepherd thing of reaching out to the, leaving the 99 to chase after the one. And I don't know how that accounts for Judas, who is definitely lost at that juncture. But the disciples did stay together. The remaining disciples stayed together. So,
When did Jesus say that?
Right before Simon Peter drew his sword. It's 18 verse 9.
In what chapter?
18:9.
In John.
Yeah.
Right before Peter drew his sword.
And it may be that one of the things that he's saying is, you can arrest me, but leave these other guys alone. And which I think they were fairly intent on doing anyway.
That's kind of what this Bible
Yeah,
says.
right before he says that, it says, let these men go.
Yeah. I mean, they remained scared that what Jesus went through, they were going to be next in line. That proved to be a false concern. As far as we know, the remaining 11 disciples, no one was immediately killed for being a disciple of Jesus. Now, tradition has that most of them died less than natural causes. but that was because of their actions in continuing to promote the gospel, and not just because they were associated with Jesus at one point.
Up until that point, he hadn't lost anybody. He didn't lose anybody until he was condemned and Judas took his life.
Yeah, but again, Jesus didn't lose them. Judas opted out.
Yeah.
You know, it's where when we as a church say, you are welcome here, and we mean it, we're stipulating that we're not going to lose people. If people choose to opt out, that's on them. It's not on us. You know, our intent was Jesus did not desert the disciples. The disciples sort of kind of deserted him when things got really rough. But that wasn't the intent of Jesus. And he defended them up till the end.
Yeah, that's my point. Up until the time he said that, he hadn't lost it. Anyone that that happened afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
After he said, I think.
Well, the whole Judas thing is tricky. And again, my interpretation.
Judas didn't take his life until after Christ was condemned.
Right. So.
And he hasn't been condemned yet.
No, I think it would really depend on how you treat the act of betrayal. You know, if that was, and I think to some extent that's when Judas opted out. There was a point of no return in the storyline with Judas, and that point hits a climax in the garden when Judas helps identify who Jesus is. That may be the climax of Judas's involvement. And then afterwards, it's just how do we understand Judas to lead the story? And he leads the story on his own terms, if you will.
Can we go on to another one?
What else would you like?
On verse 11, he says, put your sword into its sheath. Shall I not drink the cup which the Father has given me?
Well, he knows what's going on. See you, Doris.
Bye-bye.
Sorry.
Jesus knows what the score is, and he's focused. The disciples don't know the focus. They're still hoping, perhaps against hope, that things are going to work out on a more positive vein. And where Jesus is committed to the salvation story, the disciples may still be more committed to wanting a happy ending, or wanting to escape having to deal with this difficult reality of Jesus is going to die. You know, we probably all could come to the point in our lives of having a cup to drink that we would not allow to have be taken away from us. We certainly have a history of the martyrs who were given a chance to live if they simply recanted their faith. And they were too committed to do that. So they ended up paying the ultimate price for their for staying the course. There are probably those opportunities that we have, maybe not to the extent of losing our life or risking that, but certainly losing our standing among other people, losing a sense of prestige, losing status, whatever, where we have to make a decision that we're either going to do what we're called to do and let the chips fall where they may, or we're going to just break and decide to take the easy road out.
I've often thought to myself, what would I do?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, what would you do? You can stay with him and probably lose your life, or I don't know.
Yeah, I think, and not that I'm in agreement with, but back in the day, Philip and Daniel Berrigan, a couple of Catholic priests who were pretty rebellious, and Phil ended up in jail off and on for, you know, a variety of protest type things. And I had a chance to meet him and spend some time with him. And you know, the one thing that you really say coming away from, when I came away from a conversation with him, was this guy really stood up for what he believed and wasn't going to dilute his beliefs simply because of the risk involved. You know, I don't know if I would have that fortitude, you know, to if somebody said you do this, you're going to jail for a couple of years, I might say, well, it's not worth doing that. You know, I might look for a way to justify. You know, I can do better being on the outside and posting my feelings on Facebook as opposed to actually doing. Philip Berrigan was part of the Catonsville 7 that broke into a military base and were beating up airplanes and all sorts of things. So, but, you know, if there are people who, when they have a cause, cannot not keep going towards it. It's as if they have no other choice. And maybe somewhere along the line, you pass a point of no return where it's, I could turn back, I could turn back, I could turn back, but now I'm at the point where there is no turning back. So I might as well go for it. And, you know, Jesus had all the opportunity in the world to turn back at any time. He could have gone down as just being a very highly respected teacher um, and not had the problems that he had. We're going to talk a little bit about that on Sunday, because the text out of Matthew is when Jesus asked the disciples, "Who do others say that I am?" And then after they go through that rigmarole, says to them, "Well, who do you say that I am?" You know, we know what other people are thinking and where their stance is. Where's yours?
My brother has a minister. It's a woman up in Maine, and she's been arrested already, which like I can't believe. I don't know how she'd make out around here, but they, because of the ice problem up there. So I was in Saco, Maine, where that young man was killed. I mean, I didn't realize it was so close to where where I was staying. It was like 3 miles down the road. And I saw where he lived too. And there's this big, huge memorial to him, where he was shot. I mean, he was shot down, ran over, whatever. But she's been going to these, all the different ministers in Maine are, protesting. So then my brother said he went, and I went, what? He said he went to one of the, and his mother-in-law, who's 90, she went, to one of the demonstrations. I mean, they didn't get arrested, but she's been arrested. But then the charge, I guess she was hauled off to jail, but then the charges were dropped.
Yeah.
And they turned their church. They have it's a big historic church. I forget what town it's in, but they have got a grant from the state to make like apartments for people. But now they had to shut it all down because, everybody moved out, and they had to shut it all down because of fears that, that ice would come. But I didn't, I was never anywhere where it actually happened. It was really something to see,
We had a family that was having immigration issues that lived in Arch Street Church for a few months. As a place of sanctuary. And there are, again, that puts others at risk, and you have to be willing to stand up for what you believe.
I mean, she's really, pushy about everything, and she's still doing it. And it's an older I went to the church. My brother said, you'll see a lot of gray hair. Like, he's teasing about that. I said, you're one of them, But anyhow, she really pushed this project, and the fire chief of the town was definitely against it. He tried everything he could to make the project go away, these apartments. It was like rooms for the families, and a big center area, and a general kitchen where they could cook, but he tried to find every code that would be broken to stop them, but they got it through. I don't even know how, but I don't know. And it's just a small town. It's not a big town.
Part of standing up for what you believe is having the stamina to stay with it. Because obviously, and as we learn from Jesus' story and the story of others, that if you have somebody who's really pushing towards what they feel they're called to do, there's going to be somebody else pushing against it. And, I think sometimes it's easy to develop a sense of apathy to where, it's just not worth the battle. And, that's a shame, but Jesus faced this idea that, hey, look, there were a lot of people that were against him. And he could have just thrown up his hands and said, this ain't worth it. but stayed with him. And, you know, we may come across a cause that we feel we need to stay with. You know, it may not have happened yet in our life, but it could. You know, that we all have buttons that can be pushed. And we all have those things that could occur where we just say, I can't stand this. And I need to work towards what I think is the right solution. And, you know, I may lose friends along the way. I may find that my family isn't supportive. I may find a lot of things that just stand in the way, but I'm going to keep going. You know, the unfortunate thing is, again, you have to have this stamina. And if you look at the divisions in society today, it almost seems at times like it's not so much that we're going to have a discussion of issues, but that we're going to see who can wear the other side down. You know, and just persevere. Almost as if it's game playing. We had a guy, I'm going back 40 years now, and I was Little League president. And we just had this guy that, you know, in retrospect, looking back, he had a lot of stamina. But when he wanted something, he would not let up. And eventually people just would say, that's just the way he is. You know, let him have his way. That's easier than trying to get him to shut up about it. You know, the guy also didn't have any friends, but that's, you know, it was his choice.
You probably find more of that in Little League than you do most other places.
Yes. I will say that being president of the Little League was a learning experience that opened my eyes to human behavior.
But you still like baseball though,
Yeah.
right? You still like baseball, good.
I have a question, and I came across it in this chapter. Was it Jewish law, or what law, to break the legs of captors?
I would say it's more custom. And breaking the legs was that it would cause them to die sooner. It was actually seen as an act of compassion.
Gosh, sounds
But yet in Jesus' place, they didn't.
They didn't, because he was already dead. But the whole idea with crucifixion was suffocation, that you couldn't hold yourself up. Well, if you were on tippy-toe against the little plate that was at the bottom of your feet, you might struggle a lot longer. And obviously the powers that be didn't want to sit around all night long having to deal with this when they had supper to get home to. So breaking the legs just speeded up the death. But no, Jesus was already dead, and that was then cited as being part of prophecy, that his bones were not broken. So, you know, it was crucifixion had two major emphases. One was punishment, the other was public warning. You know, that one was not crucified in an isolated area. They were crucified where others would see them. And
Probably cut down on a lot of
sure
bad
it did.
stuff.
You know,
We should try that today.
well, you know, I think the idea of, that's been the debate of, you know, does capital punishment serve as a deterrent? You know, you know, I'm sure the answer is yes and no, depending on the situation. But anything dealing with punishment is not just to punish the person for what they've done, but displays for others that maybe you don't want to go the wrong route.
Public hangings and
Yeah.
way back in time.
And interestingly enough, like in colonial America, the hangings were public entertainment.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I went on a tour of Belvedere, and they showed where they used to hang the people at the courthouse. There's a door way on the back of the courthouse, way up high, but there's no porch or anything underneath it. And they were saying like thousands of people came there. You know, a lot of them had to walk to get there to see it.
It's interesting that people would want to
Doors
see.
still there.
Yeah, they would want to, I would never want to go.
I don't know.
This is
Why do
Belvedere
people-
Public.
Belvedere, New Jersey, yeah.
Why, when there's an auto accident that's off to the side of the road and clearly out of traffic, does traffic slow down?
Yeah,
Because everybody wants to get a
To
piece.
see.
yeah, everybody
Yeah.
wants to see.
Um,
Yeah. It was interesting. I forget if I don't know if they hung a woman. They were saying how many more people came. I can't remember,
Mm.
but that's where they did it. They opened that door and that was it. You know, there was like nothing there.
Nothing there.
Yeah, there was nothing there. It's still there. Every time we park the car there, it's behind we park by the post office. You can, if you walk down the street a little bit,
Okay.
you can go through that. We were behind that in the alley there, and you can see it. They had a name for it, but I forget what it was. They didn't do it in the public square
Mhm.
because that was like a beautiful area there. It was a whole block of like.
I think more like in colonial Williamsburg, it was more of a public square.
Yeah. Yeah, they didn't do it there. But this was like probably in the 1800s.
Mhm.
So,
We used to put them in those, what they call those, the stocks.
The
where they-
stockade, yeah, yeah.
So that was public display to discourage.
I don't know if that would-
We haven't come very far, have we?
No, I think that, you know, the, human beings, being human, can be very, I don't know, macabre. I think that,
Macabre. I'm a little dull. I don't.
spooky.
Yeah.
You know, that it is both repulsive and appealing at the same time. You don't necessarily agree with it, but if you get a glimpse of it, it's,
So what have we learned in John?
well, I think one of the big stories in John is Jesus' declaration that he is the Savior. That is the overarching theme that does not carry through Matthew, Mark, and Luke. We have, and on Sunday's text from Matthew, we again have the illusion of the messianic secret. Here's what you guys know, don't tell anybody. John is anything but. The 7 signs, miraculous signs, are meant to display Jesus' power. They're public events. They're not limited audience only and don't tell anybody. You think in the synoptic gospels, the transfiguration. They go to the top of the mountain and Moses and Elijah are there and they're all sparkling white. And as they climb back down the mountain, Jesus says, don't tell anybody about this. And that's that's an odd, it's like we almost get 2 depictions of Jesus. One who is reserved and wants to maintain his privacy. Another where he's very much in the public eye and revels in it. So that is it. And we have a couple of weeks off, or after Labor Day we start the next study. By the way, I think when we talk about passion and what we're willing to stand up for, I am elated that Weiss got more of the small shopping cart.
I know. I know, that's